CityCast DC is brought to you today by Jones Dairy Farm. They're a 7th-generation family-owned and operated meat maker with products like dry-aged bacon, all-natural sausage, and America's favorite center-cut Canadian bacon. I checked out the map on their website, jonesdairyfarm.com, and got back dozens of our grocery stores. You can get their sausage and pork, chicken, or turkey, and there are no preservatives, additives, MSG, nitrates, or fillers. Expect only fresh ingredients from Jones Dairy Farm, making breakfast better since 1889.
Today on CityCast DC, there are more than $1 billion in unpaid tickets owed to the DC government. And a lot of the cars that racked up those tickets are still driving around and parking on your block. If you're someone who sucks it up and pays your tickets, you might be wondering, why can't the city do something about them? It's actually a frustratingly complicated question, though there's a new law that's trying to hit the scofflaws where it hurts. The Washington Post's Rachel Weiner is here to explain. Today is Monday, December 16th. I'm Michael Schaefer, and here's what DC is talking about. Hey, Rachel.
Hi.
So you have written about efforts to get people off the road who haven't paid their tickets. And this turns out to be weirdly difficult to do, but there is a new law in place that's supposed to help. Can you explain what it is and how it is supposed to work?
Yeah, so basically, this new law makes it possible to boot and tow somebody's car immediately if they have an expired tag or a tag that does not show up in any known database. It appears to be fake, maybe handwritten, as some of the ones that I've seen on social media are. And before this, someone had to have 2 tickets on their car before they could be towed. But if you're just constantly changing your expired tags or you're covering up the tag on your car so it's impossible to link that to your other behavior, then you could basically drive with impunity. And so that's the loophole that hopefully this legislation will fix.
So explain what the status quo ante was the past few years, because we hear these stories about people with, either non-DC tags and massive numbers of parking tickets or, other people who shouldn't be driving and should, and it's been difficult to even tow their car. What were the rules of the road?
Yeah, well, so like I said before, you had to have 2 unpaid tickets on your car in order to be booted and towed, but the majority of people who get tickets in DC don't live in DC, so by just not parking in a public place in DC, they could never be held accountable. And honestly, for DC residents, for a long time, even though technically you could be towed, the likelihood that you would be was extremely low. Just a few years ago, there were only 2 booting and towing teams for the entire city.
Wait. So 2 for the entire city. So that includes people who are parked like in a dangerous spot in a school, in front of a hospital, whatever, like the kinds of stuff that you sort of associate with getting towed, not because of your prior record, but because your car is an active hazard. There were still only 2 teams?
There are separate teams that tow specifically for rush hour enforcement, for street cleaning enforcement, and that's basically the bulk of towing in the city. And then there were 2 teams that would go out and boot cars, and then if the boot isn't removed within 24 hours by the person paying their tickets, they would tow that person. But
wait, so just so I know, when you get a boot and you pay your ticket, someone then has to come around to your car and take the boot off, right?
Correct.
But what you're saying is there's there are whatever number of crews that go out to tow your car if you're in a zone where you're actively a hazard. But there were only 2 that would go and deliver the towing or the booting that comes from being a ticket scofflaw or not having your car registered and so on. How many are there going to be now?
10. So that's a big deal for them, but still they could be booting and towing at their current pace, I think, for years without getting all of the eligible cars. The council has talked about kind of forcing them to prioritize ticket scofflaws. The agencies pushed back on that and said they need to have the flexibility to make decisions about what their priorities are. But even now, as they've been doing much more of it than they did, I think since they, in April, said they were focusing on ticket scofflaws, the city administrator said recently 411 cars were impounded. I saw someone work that out to about 2 cars a day. They're doing more than they ever did before, and there's also far more cars out there that are eligible to be towed than are actually being towed.
Let's be real, lawsuits are not fun. But with Christopher Nace and the trial lawyers at Paulson and Nace, at least they're a little easier. Paulson and Nace is a D.C. law firm in every sense of the word. It was founded here in 1979. Partner Chris Nace is a local who cares deeply about the D.C. community, even serving on the board of the local branch of the Living Classrooms Foundation in his free time. Nace and his associates, Samantha Peters, John Reese, and Maya Perry, handle medical malpractice, wrongful death, and other complex injury cases. And they don't just settle every case. They'll go to court. They'll fight for you. Paulson and Nace has even been recognized as one of Best Lawyers' best law firms. So if you have been hurt or lost a loved one because of someone else's mistake or negligence, call Paulson and Nace for a no-obligation consultation. Visit www.paulsonandnace.com or call 202-463-1999.
Did you know in DC it's actually illegal to toss household batteries in the trash? Batteries have to be recycled, and Call to Recycle is here to help. DC's official battery recycling program has convenient locations all over the city where you can drop off all kinds of household batteries. Think AA, AAA, even those rechargeable ones. Just find the drop-off spot closest to you by going to calltorecycle.org/locator. That's with the number 2. So again, that's calltorecycle.org/locator. Because recycling your batteries isn't just the law, it also helps protect our environment and our community. So clear out that junk drawer and do a little good. Go to calltorecycle.org/locator today. The legendary Black Cat New Year's Eve Swing Ball is always the best night out of the year. Band leader Peaches O'Dell and her big band orchestra, that's an 11-piece orchestra, will offer everything from high-energy swing and Latin music to Art Deco novelty tunes. And because it's New Year's Eve, there will be a bunch of surprises thrown in. Chances to be a guest conductor, prizes for best red lipstick, and a conga line you have to see to believe. With no dress code and a relaxed atmosphere, the Black Cat New Year's Swing Ball Party lets you dress however you want. And it's all just $35, making the Black Cat New Year's Swing Ball one of the best deals in town. Get tickets at blackcatdc.com. Just look for the New Year's Eve event. Again, that's blackcatdc.com.
Just so we understand, who's being targeted here? Is it people who have racked up tickets from speeding cameras, or people who get moving violations the old-fashioned way by being pulled over? Or is it people with a lot of parking tickets who've just, been jerks about not paying?
So actually, part of this legislation sort of shifts the focus away from parking violations and towards speeding and safety-related violations. There was already legislation earlier this year that creates a whole new point system that makes it easier to tow somebody's car for driving violations, whether they've paid the tickets or not. The thinking being whether or not you're capable of paying those tickets, there should be a penalty for repeatedly breaking the law. And this legislation takes away the 2-ticket standard for parking violations and creates a whole new point system for that. So you can get caught 10 times forgetting to move your car for street cleaning and not get towed, because the thinking is if you racked up some parking tickets and the only consequence of your actions was that your street didn't get clean and you can't pay those tickets, do you really deserve to lose your car because of that? I think a lot of people would say no, and the council said no.
What you're saying is I could get 10 tickets for, regular parking violations, and I don't have to pay those tickets. And I, other than there being a fine that I theoretically have to pay someday that I actually don't pay, there's no other consequence I face for refusing to pay what's been assessed?
Well, Well, I think at the 10th one, then you are eligible to be towed. But yes, you could rack up 9 tickets.
Seems like a terrible message to send.
Well, I think the message it's sending is that there's a huge amount of tow-eligible vehicles in this city, and the best way to deal with that is to focus on the ones that are most implicated in unsafe behavior. And as annoying as it might be if your neighbors fail to move for street cleaning, it is not likely to result in anyone's injury or death.
So the other question I've had is, if there's people with like massive numbers of unpaid tickets or unaddressed moving violations, why not get them off the road by suspending their licenses or by not letting them renew their license?
Because we can't. And a lot of people will say that the council...
What do you mean because we can't?
Because the city can't. Legally, the city cannot. There was a law. Basically, DC had on the books something called the Clean Hands law that said you could not renew your license, you could not renew various other business registrations, etc. in the city if you had unpaid fees and fines. Now, a lot of people will point to this legislation last year where the council said you could still renew your license despite those fines and fees and say, this is the council's fault. They allowed this lawlessness on the roads. But what that ignores is that they did that when there was a lawsuit against the city arguing that it was a due process violation because camera tickets don't take a picture of your face. They only take a picture of your license plate, that you are not, given a chance to confront your accuser basically the way you would be if you were stopped by a police officer for a traffic infraction.
Well, wait, when you get a ticket in the mail, you still have an opportunity to appeal it.
Yes, but basically there's no way for them to prove that you were driving. And so a federal judge said, that's a due process violation. This is unenforceable. So basically, regardless of the council law, it's not possible to take people's driver's license away. So this is why you see the city leaders with these point systems, with legislation about food delivery vehicles. They're trying all sorts of different ways to add teeth to sort of non-police traffic enforcement.
And for old-fashioned tickets, the kind, where someone nabs you in person, if you don't pay those, are you liable for having your license taken away? Okay.
Yes, because that's someone stopped you driving. They saw that you were the person driving. They logged that. Yes.
Because those go with the license, not with
Correct.
the...
Exactly, yeah.
So there's also been this explosion of fake tags, which I assume is just because it's a lot easier to print things that look legit. Mm-hmm. How do they work? And what happens right now if the parking enforcement sees a car with obviously fake tags?
Now they can just boot and tow them, as opposed to giving them a ticket where the person could just, print out a new tag the next day and switch it out. So that's the big change from this bill.
And, I think it's interesting, this distinction that I think we've been sort of dancing around between gunning for public safety violations, which is to say people who have moving violations not paying, and gunning for kind of people scoffing at the law around their obligation as citizens to pay fines that they've accrued. It sounds like the council and the government is, maybe understandably, focusing on things that can be described as a safety problem first.
Yeah, exactly. That's what they're trying to do. So, like I said, yeah, it's just like a regular parking violation, 1 point. But having an expired tag that's over 90 days old, 5 points, because the argument is you need to be recognizable to the police and to cameras, right? You need to keep your car sort of within the system. And when you've let that lapse for months, that's unsafe.
So you reported that Mayor Bowser has said she doesn't want to pay the $4.5 million it would cost to build an actual tag registry that would help with some of these fake tags. Why is that, and how big a difference does that make?
So she opposed this bill with the same language she's used to oppose basically anything that the council has passed that she didn't include in her own budget priorities, and basically saying, like, look, we have limited funds. I've set out where I think those funds should be spent. So how are we supposed to pay for this? It's an unfunded mandate, basically. That's sort of her line, not specific to this legislation, but to any legislation that she hadn't previously supported. I think the council, that means, will have to identify the funds and have some sort of negotiations with her over where those funds should come from. But $4 million in, the DC budget is also in the billions. So, again, is a relatively small amount of money. I think it's possible. The database costs money to set up and some money to maintain. But parking enforcement, my understanding is adding a parking enforcement officer basically pays for itself in the amount of fines and fees that officer will collect. So I think they will be looking to add more. There's basically no budgetary reason not to do it.
If you're looking to get tickets and not pay them, is DC a good place to do that compared to, other states?
Well, yes. I mean, DC just, I think, unlike anywhere else, has this unique problem, which is that we're a federal jurisdiction where most of our drivers come from other states. Obviously, there are other places like New York that have a lot of commuters that cross state lines, and that is a factor in those places too. But DC in particular, just the fact that we're a city alone surrounded by states means, it's very easy for people to come here and break traffic laws and then go back to where they came from and never be held accountable.
But for those of us who actually live in the district, are we in a tougher spot compared to other cities and states, or better?
I think DC also has a problem a lot of places have now, where police enforcement of traffic laws has declined a lot for various reasons, and there's been a corresponding dangerous driving and a sense of impunity, basically, for people who engage in it. So those are national problems. I do not know whether our amount of boot and towing teams are similar to other places. That's a good question. But I do know, until fairly recently, sort of focusing on traffic violations was really not a priority at all for our parking and towing enforcement. It was, built really entirely around moving cars. And so it's only pretty recently that they've started to shift towards that. And yeah, even now, like, the vast majority of cars that they tow are just moved. And even when I went out with them on U Street to watch them do traffic enforcement, because the head of the parking administration had said, look, this is like, we're going out on U Street when lots of out-of-state drivers are coming into the city for nightlife, and we'll get those cars. I saw them tow one car that had a huge amount of tickets, but there were a bunch of other cars from out of state that also were eligible to be towed and weren't, either because they weren't parked illegally at that moment, or because they were, but they decided it wasn't bad enough to call in the tow truck. So, it's very early stages.
Which I guess means there's no data on the effectiveness of this new law.
Yeah, right. Yes. It would take, I think, hopefully next year, because they started this in the spring. They specifically had a pilot in Ward 1 where they were particularly focused on the highest dollar cars. But yeah, I think it will be a while before you could really draw any conclusions about how effective it has been. Definitely, I do wish that parking enforcement would put out some more data just in general on not just, the scofflaw enforcement, but generally, how many cars they've towed, how many tickets those cars have, I think would be great.
People your transportation reporter needs to know.
I mean, I think the public would like to know too, but because they said they've collected 411 cars with about $2.9 million in fines. There are $1.6 billion worth of unpaid fines out there among the drivers who have been ticketed in DC. So,
Rachel, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
That's all for today here on CityCast DC. If you enjoyed the show, why not tell a friend, rate the show, leave us a review, and subscribe to our morning newsletter. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. Bye.